Good evening, citizens, and welcome to another episode of the Shattersong LARP Diaries. For today, known as The Rest is Anvil. I'm Chris, and I'm joined by my erstwhile and wonderful companion. Wonderful companion, introduce yourself.
It's wonderful, Amber.
It is wonderful, Amber, indeed. What are we going to be talking about today, Amber?
Well, we've had a few wins come out, I believe, and I think one of them is particularly fruity. So we're going to ignore the fact that we haven't recorded in maybe a month, and ask you lovely listeners to also ignore that and hop on.
Yeah, Amber and I both have new jobs that started in like the last 4 or 5 weeks, and we've been busy.
Yeah, but not too busy to go through this because it's very tasty.
It is. It's also much less of a time commitment on this 30-degree evening compared to covering a single wind of, you know, let's call it what it is, spicy, versus doing, let's say, the entirety of E2 or actually finishing Bastion, something
Oh
like that.
God, yeah, got so much to do.
We do.
Oh
If
well,
we just did less LARP, we'd have less to, less to catch up on.
Drew, maybe we should just stop. Maybe we should quit.
Yeah. And that ends today's episode. Yeah, to be fair, it's slight tangent, but Warhammer wise, big Warhammer fan, and I used to ardently follow the rule of you get a box of models and you can only get another box of models when you've painted everything. Maybe that's our rule, is we're not allowed to go to a LARP until we've recorded the previous one.
Until we finished Empire, the whole thing.
Yeah, we've got a few days. I just have zero faith that we'll actually squeeze it in.
Yeah, me too.
But who knows? If you leave the specific comment, wow, can't believe the frogs did that, full stop. And if if enough of those happen, then sure, we'll do Empire. And if not, we won't. I'm leaving the value
Well
nice and
spoken.
arbitrary, and the comment nice and like unhinged as well, because I want someone to like find a video on YouTube, and there's just like a bunch of comments saying the exact same thing, and they think, oh, that's weird. Maybe I'll listen to the episode, and then at no point during that episode is that sentence uttered.
Very riveting.
Get out. Get out.
Gladly.
Right. The
Cool.
episode.
Let's do the important stuff.
Yeah, so what are
Let's
people here
start.
for? It's called 1,000 Steps. It's been published this evening on the Winds of Fortune page for E3. And the TLDR is that it's addressing some of the fiscal and financial issues in Navarre. Now, what's very unusual about this wind is I personally believe that it takes quite a I'm not going to say that a partially OC approach to things that are usually done IC. So when, let's say, the mega faith city that the Highborn are building, and they need like 1,000 wains of mithril, that was presented to them as an opportunity, and you can do this, and you get the option to pick. They don't tell you how to go around doing that. They say, hey, you need 1,000 mithril. How you do that is up to you. What's different with this win though is PD have come in and given some not just strong guidance but almost some commands, some orders on how to raise money, how to save cash, and how to actually interact with other nations outside Navarre. And I personally have never seen anything this strongly worded before in any matter apart
10
from in like
years.
OC sections. Yeah, but this is quite strong, so I think it's worth trying to digest this and giving our thoughts and opinions. But before we do that, we need to have a caveat because this is absolutely gonna blur the line between like IC action and OC opinions. And in theory, people aren't meant to do that online. You save it for the field. I think this wind alone blurs that. But of course, everyone knows that people roleplay online or they discuss things prior to Anvil because you've got so little time to actually do them. So we're going to go, fuck it, what the hell, and get stuck in. But our disclaimer, we're biased, we're ill informed, we've only read this once, we're not experts, and everything we're about to say or not say is our own opinion, which may or may not change. So feel free to take all of this episode with a pinch of salt, and otherwise sit back and listen to what is some pretty dire news for the Navari.
Yeah, I was super surprised by this win, not because I haven't really seen a lot of wins in my time. This is my like fifth event coming up. But when I joined Empire, I kind of knew from our friendship group that Navarre's been teetering on like off an economic cliff for a while. What I didn't realize is just uh how widespread it was. I thought it was just something we complained about because it was funny. The fact that PD have sort of put out this wind, which is full of almost hand holding, that might be a bit strong, but it feels like you said, here are loads of options. It feels like this is maybe a dire point for Navarre to wake up and do something.
Yeah, and I think it is hand holding, and it goes beyond. Come on, you need. It does talk about the new Navari army that needs mithril, which is the standard resource to make them, or 8,000 ingots of mainly mine but some forest materials. But before it even gets to that, it actually says, um, I think it's in the first section, or it might be a little bit later on. Navarre needs, yeah, here we go. It's the third paragraph. It's a small one, but Navarre, it just goes in straight at the start of the sentence. The Navarre desperately, in italics, desperately need more influence in the great houses of state. So, and this is, this isn't coming from the flavor text at the top from a single NPC's point of view. This is being stated in a wind, which is pretty much like an anvil or icy newspaper, and it's true. I don't think any of this, any of the guidance. Let's be polite. Let's call it guidance. In this wind, it is misleading. All of these things are, as far as I'm aware, true, because they only have one army. They technically have two, but the throne commands one. That's even pointed out in this wind. They've only got two senators left out of four, which maybe five if you want to include Brokeliand and slash Leafethan, because those territories have been on the edge for a while. But with the loss of Tharunin, the loss of a Sailor's Dance, and from again biased information here and lack of experience, I've been a priest for like one event, and I was looking at the National Assembly boards and things for Varushka, especially where I'm playing. There was some strong narratives, and when I went to the National Assembly meeting at E2, more about that in our E2 episode. It was there was lots of coherency and agreement and discussion before statements were put up, and there was a strong theme, and it was supported by the priests of the nation. It's a very different kettle of fish in Navarre, though, because there's something like 700 players. Varushka has 100. So it's 7 times more difficult to get that consensus. So maybe I'm making an unfair comparison. But when I went to the Navarre board, there's a few statements around recognizing heroes who've fallen in battle. Rest in peace, Silver. But there's also, it didn't feel like there's any specific narrative or pushes for certain effects or certain actions. Some of the statements even seem to compete with each other. And when that's the case in the Synod, they're lacking influence in the military council, they're lacking influence in the Senate. It's quite damning, and for once this wind has actually called it out. Well, I've never seen it done, and just saying you need more influence. It also talks around that Navarre need allies, and the way it's worded, and I'm gonna actually control F this, and I appreciate I'm monologuing at the moment. Yeah, so it's the sentence afterwards. They need more votes in the Senate, the military council, and the conclave. I forgot about conclave there, but that would help too. That would come with more Navarre senators and generals, of course, but a better way to gain support is to gain allies. Until the Navarre have powerful friends in other nations who are prepared to support them, there is literally no chance of any kind that they will be able to defeat the Valoran.
Yeah, and the
Uh,
no chance there is really powerful.
yeah, and a big part of my understanding and a big part of the wiki for Navarre when I was playing in Navarre was, we've got this kind of like wayward teenager kind of attitude of like we can't betray our enemies. We similar to Farushka, we engage in the dark ways and historically cruel things as well. We use poison. Calling us Imperial Druge is a bit rude, but I don't think entirely unfair. And we understood, though, we understood sacrifice. We understood that we joined the Empire to defeat the Forlorn, and being part of the Empire is incredibly important to us because we cannot succeed without the other nations. And the fact that that's a core part of the brief, and it's got to the point where a Wind of Fortune is pointing this out and going, you need allies. You need to gain the support of your allies, and there is no chance you'll be able to defeat the Vlon without this. This is very strong wording from PD, and maybe I'm reading too much into this because I'm objectively too Navarr pilled to ever really let go. But in your opinion, is this quite strong? Is this quite like I haven't seen anything like this before, but for you, does this read a bit more gently, perhaps?
Not at all. I think the one good thing about PD pieces when they come out is that they're usually as unbiased as they can be while keeping that lovely storytelling narrative and allowing the players to do things in game. This here just feels like a little bit of a almost a cry for help from PD to say, guys, you're struggling. Please engage with some of the ways that your nation are going to be saved. And I can't imagine any other nation in Empire getting something like this. And I wonder if it comes. I mean, we could probably talk about how we've got here, but we've touched on it in other podcasts, especially the one with Dave and Javid. Sorry, Martin. Um, just on there's it's so fractured that PD must have picked up on it at some point and gone, okay, we need to write up something that's going to drive a bit of national spirit, maybe inspire some people to pick up this plot. And I think that the fact that they're sort of telling them to go to other nations is PD saying almost like play the game. You need to go and work together. Can't just start, you know, isolating yourselves because it's going to get so much worse. And they don't really touch a lot on like consequences, which is nice. They sort of just allude to, uh, you know,
Yeah, I think it's got to the point now where they don't even need to display or allude to what the consequences might be because Navarre are already experiencing them. So even with that post consequence world, right? So we've talked about they need to gain support and gain allies. There's literally no chance of any kind they'll be able to defeat the Forlorn. The next sentence talks around funding their new army. Talks about what I said before with the Sailor's Dance. Down to two armies, one's commanded by the throne. And I'm going to read this word for word. The current pace of contributions needs to increase, otherwise the army will never be finished. It's time to pick up the pace, as they used to say on the Stridings. I mean, I've never
nice
seen
way for
something
them to
so
wrap it back.
direct. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I like the last sentence almost softens the blow a little bit,
just a little bit.
just a tiny bit.
Yeah, it follows on for talking around the 8,000 ingots that they need. Um, this is mechanical, so we can say this without being controversial for once. But Mithril is used to make armies, but Navarre have a unique opportunity, which I think came from 2 or 3 summits ago, which again in itself was quite controversial because all of our armies have been made by Mithril. Yes, that's expensive. That's the point. But I think PD realised that with the either impending or soon to be impending invasion of Tharunin, because I imagine they knew about it before the Empire did, right, as game runners, they probably realised that Navarre needs an olive branch. They need a win. They need just some way to get out of that economic spiral because until the loss of Tharunin, they still only had one boar seat. They had something called the Thimble in Tharunin, and that was their only source of strategic resource. And that was for Weirwood, which I believe is the cheapest on the field, or has been historically. I won't talk numbers, but it crashed.
Crashed.
It crashed last
Navarre.
event, and went from like I think they mentioned it on some of the other wins this before this upcoming event, that there's been a bourse crash. That was definitely weird with last summit. It went from like 4 throny ish to 2 throny ish. which
Yeah, I think that was
50%
highlighted
drop.
in the last wind.
Yeah, absolutely unprecedented stuff in the bourse. But even so, poor Navarre, they got one resource and it's just halved in value, and that was before the Druze show up on the horizon and take it from them. They're also a nation that later on in this we'll cover it in a bit more detail later. Um, Varushka's got mines. The league has businesses. Uh, whilst there's lots of military units in Navarre, I think there's even more herb gardens, and the herbs, in my experience, don't get paid for. They're used on your friends. They're used on your striding mates, which is the moral thing, the nice thing. I'm not sure how to describe it, but it's been the status quo. But it actually mentions further down that maybe they should start charging for that as well, because it's a huge chunk
I'm
of Navarre's
honestly,
GDP, and it's, in the nicest way,
yeah,
literally worthless.
I'm honestly surprised at how little I see people peddling herbs because people sell everything at LARP, like from, cakes to services, like that everything is sold. And the fact there isn't sort of a herb economy just shows that's a bit of a missed opportunity. Um, and even if there is no demand for them, people should still maybe try, especially for nations in that much of a pickle. But even with people generating herbs, they're not really being distributed. I think I know a couple of Navarre people who, have a lot of them and are clearly keeping them. So now's maybe the time to start distributing them with, like you said, a cost attached.
Yeah, if you look at the size of Navarre, let's call it 700 players, Varushka's 100. It's probably wrong, whatever. 700 crowns a summit go into Navarre in raw cash. Well, 18 rings times 700, right? Let alone what they get in their personal resources, let alone what military units get from certain actions or the Gurden. So there'll be business owners, mine owners. There's not many of them, but there is a lot of coinage running into Navarre just because of its sheer size. So I do wonder where all of that goes, because when I was playing, everyone was quite poor, especially cash poor. And a lot of their um, I guess you could call it the forest economy, was barter
Mm.
based or cake based or resource based. And because there's so many players in the forest, it's actually strong enough and large enough to support its own internal economy. So I rarely saw other Navari abroad doing trading. There are, of course, those big fish, those big players. Every nation has them, and they will be abroad. But they're not walking around hawking stuff. They're not getting those small trades of like 30 or 40 resources and getting the right people in the right place. I didn't see much of that in my time. Ironically, that's also something they discuss later on in the wind as well.
Do you think there's a bit because I walk into that forest and I leave like 10 dress sizes like bigger because of how much cake it's thrown at you. Do you think there's almost a fear of leaving the forest to trade, or maybe it's become so normalized to just trade in the forest, like people will come to you that they don't necessarily go out of the depths? But then I suppose that said, the money's coming into Navarre, so it's clearly staying somewhere. And part of me thinks that there might be sort of a hoarding going on where it's concentrated, but people aren't really spending like they should, and it's just going to waste being, hoarded. Either that or the kids are doing a great job at just stealing everyone's coins because I
Well,
swear, like you walk in there and they just take all the money from you.
you can call it stealing if you want. I call it adorable business representation. And you do get a cake for it. Have you just paid 15 rings? Yeah, but that's your problem, citizen, not the kids. um, so interesting there, because running a cake stall, generating cash, and using it to enable your game, like LARP is a fun hobby. If you want to do that, no one's going to tell you not to. I see, however, your point around hoarding cash and coin. It, people would argue prosperity. I can make as much money as I want. It's a free market. Might have heard those words before in the real world. But the impact of that, like you said, is there's a lot of cash going in, and perhaps it's sitting in boxes, it's sitting in maybe other forms. So people are buying mana crystals, for example. That's become a secondary currency in Anvil for sure over the last couple of years. Um, there's also the religious side of things. So with prosperity being a virtue, again, making money, spending it on your friends and the rest of your striding, getting a bunch of magical resources or sorry, magical items, other resources, whatever. But then there is also a line in the virtue of prosperity, which is there should never be, I think, food uneaten, money unspent, or magic unused. I hope I'm quoting that
Something
correctly.
like that, yeah.
Yeah. The magic one feels like it's shoehorned in, but the food uneaten, good point. Let's eat the cake. But secondly, is the money unspent. Because if, let's make a wild assumption. There are some people sitting on, collectively two, three, 400 thrones in Navarre. It might be coin, or it might realistically be supplies of herbs, like you mentioned earlier. They need to go and liquidate that into coin. And then once they have those coins, choose to just give it up for the good of the nation. And there's lots and lots of talk in Navarre about national projects and national pushes. The City of Dreams, Serin is another good example. That was meant to be a huge point of Navarre pride and proving that they could build a city to rival something in the league, for example. That has not been built for like 3 or 4 years now, and because getting 700 people to wrangle together to just give up resources that you seem to struggle to hold on to anyway, and then do that at scale, and then do it in a way that rewards 700 players versus the 100 in Varushka. It's yeah, I feel really bad for them because PD are quite clearly pointing out a lot of problems here that are legitimate. There's no easy way to do this, except of course eat the rich, which
Don't eat the cake, eat the rich, Navarre.
don't eat the
We
cake,
need
eat
to
the rich. And
down with them.
there might be the thing is I know a lot of these people, so I don't want to be mean, so I won't. But what I'm gonna say is the Navari leadership, and this is a mixture of like the hat positions. You've also got wealthy brokers. You've got people of influence in the nation. Maybe there's like a choice to make where you just empty out your pockets, lead by example, and fund these things, or somebody goes around with a bunch of let's say prosperous thorns and just starts collecting the cash. I'm not going to say by force, but I'm going to say there's like a you can't increase taxation in
Tax.
the empire, but yeah, people coming into the forest, you could have a virtue fund, you could have an army fund box right by the gate. You want to come through the gate, it's a ring, prosperity. But the point is, like, Navarre needs to start monetizing what they have, and you've got their songs and storytime circle, you've got their market. You've also got the rich role play of going into a wonderful magical forest and hanging out with 700 people. That's got some inherent value, right? It's got to. So there's some lines here around. Where is it? Bum, 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 bum.
Do you think the Valorn
That's
Guard could kind of be a tool for that? Like, if they maybe pitch themselves instead of an army, but as maybe a mercenary unit and monetize like a fight against the Valorn, is that something they can do?
I, maybe, but I think that's even worse because
Mm.
the whole point of Navarre, not to massively um, not to oversimplify it, but it's to wipe out the Valorn. If the Valorn Guard are going to do a more effective job of that, which includes Dawn and other nations, right? What does that say about Navarre as a nation? There were
Mm.
lots of questions around when we were, sorry, when they, I'm not part of the gang anymore.
You're a
When,
cousin now.
when Navarre was thinking about pushing the button to end the Valorn waiting and start the fighting, right? Let's begin the final war. Lots of questions cropped up around, well, what if we win? Not if we lose, but what if we win? What happens to us as a nation? Do we cease to exist? There were lots of interesting comments on that debate, and then I think some of those could apply here. Is if the Valorn Guard are more effective at galvanizing the Empire to fight the Valorn, then what is the point of Navarre?
Yeah.
I'm not
I
going to
mean,
comment
what's the
on
point
that.
in them at the minute? Then they're not really providing much, but maybe that's too spicy for the podcast.
No, like I mean, it's not spicy. It's said in one of the lines of
Mm.
this Wind of Fortune. The Navarre desperately need more influence in the great houses of state. They need more armies, they need more senators, they need to be influential in conclave, they need to be more influential in the synod as well. And I think those, they have armies, they have senators, they have cardinals, so they have the levers. They've got their hand on the lever of change. They need to pull it more effectively. There's 700 people behind them in this tug of war, but not everyone is pulling in the same direction. But anyway,
You you
yeah, yeah,
you
it's
said that there's obviously 700 players. I think that's giving them an easy route out because you're right, scale is a huge issue. But it only takes, a small group of people to put their heads together and go, okay, if we split this work, if we delegate, if we actually put a structure in place, I'm sure there's people in Navarre trying to do that, which must be really frustrating. But if even each sort of striding was to start maybe taking something that PD is offering here and running with it, you'd see progress twice as fast. And maybe that's missing because I think of our like Boyers meetings where there is maybe sort of 11 people in a tent. Here's an issue. What can we do over the weekend to fix it? And by Sunday, it's fixed, or that we have something to go into the next event with. And I wonder if there is a mechanic in Navarre already in play that's, maybe just not doing that as effectively or needs to start doing something. I don't really know what the Thorns Council or, the brands meetings are like, but do you think that's where those conversations start?
definitely the brands council is something I saw in my early years of play, and I don't think I saw in the last 2 or 3 years of play. It might have changed now, of course, but the brands are the leaders of Navarre, and they're not um, like a boyar, owns a vale, right, and they lead the people within it. The brands, especially of stridings, they're dedicated to a purpose rather than just I'm in charge because I say so. They're they might be, hey, I want to walk the length of the empire to take pride in my ancestors. Great, and you pick up other Navari who agree with your task, your mission, and they follow you, and you become the de facto leader. You could almost argue that a general in Navarre is kind of like a brand because their purpose is to lead Navari forces to crush the enemies of the empire, right? And they've got 5,000 thorns who go, yeah, that's pretty cool. I'll follow you. What could be done, and I think should be done, is you give a lot more power to that brand's council. And like you said, actually, I think that's a really good idea. Is you pick each one of these things. Like one of them is going out and begging. I'm not even joking. Again, I'm simplifying, but it's the a little
God.
beneficiary section. I think it's yeah, second from the bottom. Um, a broker from Bekeliand is of the view that all these ideas of trade are really missing the mark. She argues the nation should just ask for help. It might hurt the Navarre's pride to go begging from camp to camp, but Catherine is having none of it. There are plenty who are too proud to beg, but none are too proud to starve. Again, PD is telling Navarre players to go out and beg. So if 1/7 of the brands want to take responsibility of this and just go around making friends, and like we heard at the start, making allies, they should go own that. You take another seventh of them to do the simple exchange, which is collecting marrowwort. You need 60 for a wain of mithril, which they could use to offset the cost of the army. Great. You've got shared sacrifice. You need a group to go out and talk to Wintermark and ask them to give up their Runeforge slot for a year, which is really important to them. And it mentions here as well, the only nations who actually signed up to help fight the Forlorn are Highguard, Varushka, and it wasn't Dawn, it was the League. That was it. They were the only three nations who actually chose to support them of pressing the button, time to fight the Forlorn. So they need to go, someone in the vast some brands, and it does need to be the brands. They need to take an oath, and I'm using my wiki knowledge here. You need to take an oath, take a brand, and commit yourself to improving relations with Urizen, improving relations with the Brass Coast, with the purpose of getting more prosperity into Navarre. Take that oath, take that brand, and then tell other people in Navarre about that. Tell them that that is your mission. Tell them that I'm going to do this, but I need help and I want you to follow me, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to help me, and together we're going to save the nation. You need any player can do that. It's part of the brief. It's part of the wiki.
They almost need They almost need like a fleet of ambassadors of some kind, like just people who are elected maybe, or just asked to go to find out when each sort of national assembly is or when the musters are and just speak up. I think that might have a bit of an effect.
Yeah, and I know they've taken a lot of casualties in their military leadership over the last year or
Mm.
so. You've just had, General the Blackthorns was revoked by Solomon Dawn, just via the synod. We've had deaths. We've had the throne taking an army off them as well. So other areas of the nation need to step in. And personally, I think one of the most superb negotiators and ambassador like players is the ambassador to Axos. And I'm going to mix here. There is a whole section of Another Wind that talks about the Axos trade winds and how is diplomacy going with them. And the answer is very well. And that is because of the work of an individual player. And I think that individual player might be a really good shout when they've done so well in one area of showing people how to make friends, build allies, because that particular role with Axos isn't just Navarr. It's owned by a Navarri, but it's also, and I've seen it involve lots of different nations, lots of different characters from the Senate, from the Military Council, especially from the Synod when I was champion of Vigilance. That's a fully international role. And
Mm.
skills like that, it'd be really cool if there could be a few more people to do so. And then they go out internally as ambassadors, like you just said, going out to the Brass Coast, going out to Windsmark and going, hey, this is why it's important. Here's what we can offer you. We can offer you guaranteed amounts of herbs. We can offer you runners. We can offer you military aid. Now, what Navarre could do is fund a bunch of mercenary banners, and instead of fighting as a cohesive military force in Anvil, is you section off groups of 50 people, assign them to, Navarre Banner 1, Navarre Banner 2, give them cool names, of course. They're like mini armies. And then you go and sell those to the highest bidder. And that feels really, that might grind against some people's purpose of, well, I want to fight with Navarre as a whole. But Navarre is a massive nation. And not everyone would need to go out and merc, but some people could. Some groups could. I know Blackscar have had a merc banner historically, but they've stopped that now. But maybe other random groups could, smosh together, go off to the league and say, hey, we've got 50 additional fighters, pay us, 20 thrones for the summit, because the league can afford that. The mercs then keep half of that for themselves, because let's be prosperous. And then the other 10 thrones goes towards the army. And it'd be really
Yeah.
cool to have like
Or even
Thornborns fighting in different parts of the Imperial army. That'd be sick.
yeah, or even hire yourselves out as a healer block. You've got all the herbs there. So
Yeah,
if you can attach yourself to some fighters and say, for this battle, for this amount of money, we will keep your troops alive, or, we'll get you back home. Pitch the skills that you have, even if, and it can be off field as well. You could find something that a nation needs. Just go speak to, find out who a senator is, find out who a wise one is, and see what they say, what the nation needs, and monetize it.
yeah. Nims Noms, a service that delivers messages around Anvil with a slice of cake for 5 rings, if I'm
We had
remembering the
our first
posters right.
last
Did
yeah,
we?
last event. We did, yeah. We'll get onto that at our it was a delight. It was so much fun. The
Well, there
cake.
we go. A spontaneous advert for Nims Noms there, but the something like that is fantastic because Navarre are like messengers, they're runners, they go around. Brokers as well. It's not just hello, I'm a trader. Brokers on the wiki, the point of them is to bring two other wealthy people together and facilitate trade and then take a cut. You're literally a broker, like a mortgage broker, right? Lean into that a bit more. Offer to ferry messages between the Senate and the military council because senators are not allowed in the MC tent. But if you're just a helpful person for hire, then you can, and you wouldn't be breaking the law. And bringing that cohesion between what's going on in the Senate, which is mainly just budget, 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 and then what's going on in the MC tent, which is we need more armies, we need more armies. Building up those relationships, being able to actually facilitate those as well, gives you a lot of soft power. And if Navarre could, like you said, have those group of brands, those group of brokers, they go out and they become ambassadors for the nation, then they can start to build up that soft power. They could even do things like, going around and telling stories to different nations, like roving bands of performers. The Bardsteds are a great example. Absolutely superb OC musicians. Like, I love listening to them. We can actually hear them off the back of Anvil warming up before events begin, and even then it sounds lovely. But the bards did, or groups like them, or other groups who play musical instruments, instead of playing in Navarre, there's lots of talented people who play in songs and stories, and they sing or they dance. I know those people exist because I've seen them. Imagine if they went out and put performances on in the league theatres, or just throw a coin at them. They could do it in
Yeah.
Varushka, you throw resources at them. They could go and do it in the Brass Coast, and well, they'd probably just join in at that point. But they could take their culture, which is fantastic, start to spread that around the field, travel a bit, which is in their brief, and be paid appropriately for it. Because I don't think the VAR are very good at charging for their services, and maybe a positive way of seeing this wind is saying, you know what, it's about damn time people start paying you what you're worth, Navarre. You're lots of very nice people. You've got lots of herbs. You've got some of the best entertainment in Anvil. Sell it.
Now's the time for them to do it as well because people have read this wind and I think they're going to be a bit more charitable toward like there's almost going to be a pity culture I think towards Navarre which they might hate but it's now is the time to capitalize on that and you're right people need to go to the bars they need to go where the people are and the people who are spending money are no longer in Navarre which we is clear from this wind you need to go to places like Varushka where you know the money is but not even that like if you're a newish sort of player and you're still a bit unsure about how your resource works, or you know maybe going and speaking to a general or a senator is a little bit intimidating. There's ways to make money through like picking up a shift at the library or seeing if you know your local bar wants you to help man the bar for a bit. And whatever money you
Senate
get
Guard.
from that, you could just, yeah, Senate Guard, you can just maybe donate that back in. So it will take a little bit of, uncomfortable like volunteering, but I think everyone's going to be a bit more generous and give that to the players than usual.
Yeah, and I'm actually just logging in and checking something before I comment on it. But in the meantime, also groups of you know, courageous and wonderful thorns. If some of your healers, maybe your vines, have been helping other nations, and the other nations haven't been paying their way, maybe you should pick up your spears and pay a visit to those groups, because it's not very prosperous to take and not give back. In fact, a key tenet of prosperity is to despise the thieving beggar. And whilst this wind might perhaps be suggesting Navarre goes around and begs, you are not thieves. What you're asking for is prosperity to be shared. And that is to enable, it's not just so you can put it in your pockets and walk away, or at least it better not be. What it is for is building armies that will protect the empire. What it is for is reclaiming territories that will pay taxes and help stabilise the Senate budget. And what it's for is getting a nation that has a lot of potential off the floor. Because once it starts running, 700 players. Imagine them with upgraded businesses or upgraded herb gardens that are actually being paid appropriately for those herbs, military units that are going down the hole, Lorenzo's deep pocket, as it's mentioned on
Mm.
the actual wind itself. And even on that, just I know we've talked at length so far around how there's almost an OC element to this. It actually, for like maybe one of the three times I've ever seen this, is it's commented on the number of players with a certain resource. PD know this. They know what players have what resources, what territories, what they do. They've got big spreadsheets, right? They've got a database. Of course, they know this. But it's very rarely, and I mean very, very rarely, actually shared with the players. But in Dig for Victory, on the wind, it says that Navarre have over 150 military units. I didn't know that. That's an incredibly valuable
Insane.
piece of information. It then handholds them and says every MU that goes to Lorenzo's deep pockets with your mana crystals and 6 ingots a season. So it's done the research for you. It then suggests that Feast of Heroes, a summer ritual, could boost that production further. And not only have they suggested all of this, hint hint, nudge nudge, please go down the hole. They've also included NPC wise, 3 Navarre artisans from Treji, the Treji Way House, have provided 3 ritual foci that would make the ritual easier to cast. So PD are handing out helping hands for doing this plan, but they're just giving to you. And they even actually mention a number. So 900 ingots in a single season plus the mana crystals, which could then be recycled into that Feast for Heroes ritual, yielding a potentially another 900 ingots. Now, that's 1800. You need, is it 8,000 ingots? Yeah, you need 8,000 ingots, and that's a way to get 1,800 of them. So 25% of the way there. But then again, that's assuming every single MU in Navarre does the same thing. And that's going to be the real challenge for the brands at this summit is that sounds very difficult. Someone needs to grasp the nettle and pull that out and actually do that.
I mean, and also it says that it's more than 150 that regularly attend. So that number might be bigger, and you've also got a whole wave of new players. This is going to be the busiest event of the year, so now is the time to go around and preaching to those groups about, please please use your downtime wisely. I wanted to actually hop into downtime, so that was a good, nice little segue
You're welcome.
because you did some work last event. We won't go into it too much. We'll save that for the podcast. But I know you really want to encourage use of sort of travel that's in the Navarre brief. Do you think that's something that they can also encourage at the next event?
Yeah, so that's thank you, Amber. That was a fantastic segue back into the segue I was checking is we've talked at length on this wind in mixing OC and IC opinion slash fact slash whatever, right? And I was trying to limit it, but based on what is available, basically the thing I've been pushing for is getting a Navari warehouse built in Ossium. Boring bit here. I'm going to explain the mechanics here, the spreadsheet nerd side of me, right? Ossium, territory in Varushka, wherever you build a warehouse as Navarre, you get to live there basically, and you get all the benefits of having resources in that particular region, oh sorry, particular territory as well. There's already an existing one in Highguard, I think it's Rykos, where you get an upgraded herb garden, and lots of Navari seem very excited about that, as they should be. It's basically a free upgrade because again, these warehouses were introduced a few summits ago, and maybe a year ago now. Time does fly, but the whole point here is like crikey, Navarre's infrastructure over the last 10 years of the game has not been developed. Other nations have. And the easy way to get that is Navarre just travel and they hop on the back of that infrastructure. Rykos is a good example because they're good at herbs, and hey, look, Navarre get more herbs. Outstanding. But having lots of herbs, as we can see, and is pointed out in this wind, doesn't solve their problems. It's not ingots, it's not being paid for, it just gives them more gain, which you can argue, OC, is a point all to itself. And if you, dear listener, are listening to this and you're like, wow, this is really gamey, please ignore me, because if you're having fun with your upgraded herb garden, or if you're having fun with your basic herb garden in Brokeliand or Therudin, and you're very keen to fight like the Scoia'tael, go for it. That's based, and that's also very much on the brief. But if you do want to listen to me as a spreadsheet nerd, listen on. Ossium has not one but two infrastructure upgrades to it as a region. All of this is wiki information, so this isn't breaking the fourth wall or anything. And TLDR is that instead of producing 12 measures every season, you produce 20. Field prices, I'm going to give a loosey-goosey number, but it's just shy of 3 thrones for that amount ish. Of course, it depends on how good you are at trading, but that's if you sell all of it, you might want to keep some of it. The market is going to skew, whatever. The point is, when you're just pulling in on a herb garden, you might get 9 or 10 crowns, maybe 11. Again, it depends. 12 resources, let's say, 12 dragon bone or something, might get you between 11 and 13 crowns. But when you're smashing another 8 measures on top of that, you're making an absolute bank. And it's one of the reasons why Ossium is, and therefore Varushka, right, is so wealthy. Because the players in Varushka have done a fantastic job over time of investing their nation's wealth back into the nation. It's not being hoarded, it's not being kept, it's not being squandered or stolen or wherever, right? it has just gone back into the nation, and they're reaping the benefits again and again and again over time. Now, the hack, the cheeky thing, is if Navarre move, they get those benefits. And all of a sudden, let's take those 150 MUs, right? PD is suggesting that those MUs become a financial gain, like a financial engine for Navarre. What they could do is switch to Ossium, or they could switch to Rykos. And then all of a sudden, all of that value times 150 or 200 or hell, even 400 if the nation is serious about switching over and powering through. Let's be really optimistic here. Let's say 400 players switched over to Ossium, for example. And the whole point is they're there temporarily until the army is funded with the measures that they will harvest, and then they go back to Bukelian, they go back to Thurunin, whatever, right? The speed at which you could fund that army is incredible. Because if you've got what, 20
Skyrocket.
each, that's 8,000 in a single season. If you've got 400 people in there, the army would be funded in a single season, assuming that every single person gave up all of their wealth. And that's the crux here, is all of these suggestions from PD and from your humble podcast host. It it's all dependent on Navarre just giving up more wealth. And I don't think players are going to take to that really, unless something profound, or perhaps some kind of profound decision, is presented to them in game, probably by other members of their nation, that genuinely changes their mind, genuinely convinces them to dig deep and give up everything in order to save their
Yeah.
nation.
I also saw a comment earlier which irked me a little bit. So someone I think mentioned that, you know, this way house thing was proposed to them, and they said, that moving territories is a big commitment. But Navarre is the perfect place to move territories. Like they're literally travelers, walk the trods. And if anything, I think songs and stories and it's such a perfect place to come together and tell your stories about where you've gone. And if you can come back and sort of share a story from Ossium, it's so much more interesting than I've actually never been to songs and stories, but I imagine
Wow,
that
you're
Ossium
generally
is
missing
is
out. OC missing out.
I know.
Fantastic.
I've never had the time to, and I'm not from Navarre, so I've listened to grandmother tell some stories, and that's pretty epic. But every time I walk past songs and stories, I'm like, I should probably sit here for a bit. But it's Empire, and it's always very busy. So maybe next time. Maybe if Navarre, I don't know, promise to do something, I'll go. But I don't think that's a very good hook.
Yeah, actually, you know what? That's what about personal invites to songs and stories?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. If
that'd be
talking
really
about
cool.
building allies is introducing people to Navarre, because around that circle there's a lot of Navarre, and there's a smattering of other nations, but it is overwhelmingly Navarre. I stand by my statement of it's some of the best entertainment on the field. I'm not
Could
saying
take
you
it on
ticket
tour.
it, but what I'm saying is you invite dignitaries to come to Songs and Stories for an hour, and especially if dear listeners, if you do want to go to anywhere, sorry, go for it at any particular time, go right at the end, sort of 10 minutes to 1 in the morning, if you're still up at that point, of course, and just listen to the final song. It is wonderful and captivating, and it's impossible to experience that and then not feel an ardent love for the nation.
It feels like a peak like LARP experience. I think it's one of the things that drew me to a Navarre brief when I started reading about Empire. But yeah, it sounds like they need a ticket master of some kind. We need sort of ticket touts and things.
Almost like a reward, make it a bit exclusive. Like, well, we only invite people to songs and stories, people who are our, I don't want to say friends because that sounds like, oh, you can't sit in my treehouse, but
You can't
yeah.
sit with us.
Yeah, but like friends or people worthy of respect, or perhaps what you could do is the other nations who have committed to fighting the Valorn, you make a special effort to make them feel appreciated, or just go and tell them that. Like if a Navari came up to me but I didn't know and said, thank you so much for, Varushka supporting us in fighting the Valorn, your National Assembly getting behind us, it means a lot. There's no way I can react to that negatively, and if someone did, they're a dick. I see.
I was gonna,
I see they're a dick.
I I wanted to swing the conversation a little bit because my experience with being in Varushka is I've got a lot of friends who are very pro Navarre, really want to help out with the Valorn and stuff, but there's also another side, and that side is they don't trust them to help us on the battlefield. They don't really trust the infrastructure that they've built for themselves. And I think there are things that have happened in the last summit which might also make the same people a bit hesitant to give them their money. And I don't know if this is something that's happened IC or OC, so I'm pretty sure it's happened IC,
Yeah.
but that's the war chest has recently lost money, the Navarr war chest. So can we even trust Navarre to use the money that if everyone does, put in all this effort and they raise the money, can we trust them to use it in a wise way? Or do you think, there needs to be a sort of nanny state where we go in and we almost tell
Gosh,
Navarre just how to use their money? Because I'm worried that's where we're headed.
my knee-jerk reaction to that is to ridicule you, Amber. But then I also am staring at my computer screen at a win that is precisely nanny stating Navarre, telling
Yeah,
them to
it
go and make,
really is.
literally go make friends, pick up the pace, send your military units down the hole. Like it's hand holding, and I mean, if that so first of all, let's assume that's all I see. There's been some theft going on. Maybe it is OC because crime, maybe like a couple of years ago, was made illegal in the game in terms of the actual game rules. So nicking stuff is just breaking the rules of the game. So it's I'm not even going to shy away from it. It's absolutely what my character did, some of my previous characters did in the past. But that's when it was part of the game, you know? And it was things like heists. It wasn't just tee hee, I'm stealing your lunch money. It was, hey, we're going to go and steal 35 thrones from a prevalent banker esque person because we've got some good intel and some spies that have told us where it is, and there's a daring and exciting plan to go get it, not naming any names. But the um the idea that I see Navarre can't be trusted to even look after their own cash, or if there was a big whip around, is there a bad actor here? And I mean this in an IC way, is someone deliberately playing the baddie, which I totally respect, because if everyone's the goodie, LARP gets very boring. But
I mean,
some
we know
people
they're there.
skimming.
We know, like Pickers Gold Leaf, who would have thought that there were traitors in Navarre? There clearly are. So,
Yeah,
can we trust Navarre? It is a real question. And I don't want to ask it, but people are. So,
yeah, I think
uh,
if I was to talk to those people OC, I would giggle and I'd be like, "Gosh, can you imagine?" I see. Um, I don't want to believe that, and I think it's very difficult to say because the evidence points otherwise, right? Assuming this isn't scuttlebutt and has happened. Again, refer to our disclaimer earlier, right? We absolutely engage with scuttlebutt like it's fact, but what the contributions to the army are done in downtime. So if people feel that way, they can always. I I might be wrong in this. Double check it yourselves, but I think you can contribute to the army directly in downtime because you pick a commission to support, and what the commissions will be
yeah.
raising that Navarre army, and you can just give them your resources yourself. It's the IC equivalent of just going to the civil service and going, "This is for the army," dumping a bag of cash on the table and walking off. But if that was like widespread, oh well, I don't know. Like that's I think that would actually be a very exciting game because Navarre will of course say no, that's not true. Other nations will say, oh well, yes it is, and then people within each nation will disagree. Blah blah blah, and you've got PvP, political PvP, which is the literal point of Empire LARP. It is a political PvP game. So I'm not giving you a short answer, that's for sure. But that's very
See,
interesting scuttlebutt to hear because I don't want to I don't think I can outright dispute that because if Navarre were good at handling cash or pooling cash and funding things, we wouldn't be in this situation.
I feel bad actually because you can tell there are definitely individuals in Navarre who are really, really trying to, rally the nation together and to get some coherent economic strategy happening. Why do you think their voices are maybe going under the radar or just maybe being ignored?
Um, so in Varushka, bear with me. You are one of 100 people. You have 1% of the output. What is 1 out of 700? And then if we times that by 100, I definitely have a STEM degree, I promise. You are 0.14% of the voice. Now, there's often expressions like, you're 1 in 100, you're 1 in a million, because sometimes, even against the odds, people in those positions can make a difference. There is not a saying for you're 1 in 0.14, or
It
you're
should be.
0.14 in 100. Um, I think anyone trying to fix this as an individual is going to have an uphill struggle, but that will make it more heroic. To be more practical, I think if individual groups, now if you're sat on your Discords going, wow, Navarr's fucked, someone needs to do something, and everyone's like, yeah, yeah. If everyone agrees in your group, you're the group that needs to be doing this. That's an IC opinion. OC, do what you want. Parp's a holiday. IC, if all of you agree, your brand or someone else needs to take a brand to they need to dedicate themselves to unfucking this scenario and then go do it. And you need to help that person. And then all of a sudden, if we times that by 10, you're suddenly 1.4% of the nation. And if you've got 20 people behind you, you're 2.8% of the nation. And then if you get that Thornborn of 50 or so, like I mentioned earlier, for fighting with different nations, getting that banner, all of a sudden you're 7.14% of the nation. Now that's enough of a voice to make
As a
a
snowball.
difference, yeah, and start snowballing from there. So I'm gonna say something that perhaps is blindingly obvious. Someone needs to pick this up and just make yourself. You just tell people you're in charge of improving relations with Varushka. Go do it. If you run into someone else who's doing it, and lots of people I think get afraid of like, well, what if I'm stepping on someone's toes? You might do, and then when you meet those toes, you apologise, and then congratulations, you're now colleagues, and you keep stepping on
Or
toes
rivals,
into
which is also fun.
ooh, or maybe like rivals to lovers, who knows? But yeah, I think to actually fix this, PD's advice here is direct and perhaps blunt, but it's valid. It's totally valid, and Navarre should lean into their brief of brands and being mobile and take maybe a little bit of a like a an Alan Sugar page out of the book or something like that and start charging for things you give people because Navarre's a very nice nation. People help each other. There's a strong community. What you need to do is be like a venture capitalist, go out and get other nations involved, and then bill them for it. And if they don't pay their bills,
Yeah.
you just send a bunch of thorns around to their camp and you rough them up.
You know what? I think a really good tool this summit will be actually utilizing the new players because I know Navarre gets a lot of oh, but there's a lot of new players. I'm guilty of saying it. There's a lot of new players in Navarre, so maybe they don't want to engage with this game. But you'll have a lot of new players coming now who want game, who want those little leads, who want a task to do or an odd job. If there are experienced players in Navarre, you can sort of maybe seek out that new blood and go, this is your mission for the weekend. And it gives them something to do. I
Yep.
think that could be really efficient.
Yeah, totally. That's how we actually met Sol. Sol was a solo larper, the most loneliest of fish in the pond. And it
Oh,
was a single chance encounter. I think it was, hey, do you want to go on a skirmish? Because I was desperately looking for more fighters. And Sol was like, yeah, sure. Nothing else to do.
yeah.
I'm a new player. And then that spudded into a beautiful friendship. So when it comes to picking up these new players, I think saying, "Oh well, there's lots of new players, we can't do anything." I think the opposite is true. You have
Yeah.
all of this fresh talent, totally unmolded, waiting for your leadership, waiting for your influence. That is absolutely going to help you because there's nothing else going on. There's no busy ambers from Varushka coming through and going, "Oh, I don't have time for songs and story because I'm a big important adjutant." Blah blah blah. Actually, you meet lots of really friendly new people, like Scott or Jane or whatever their names are going to be, and they say, "Yeah, I've got all these herbs in my pack. I have no idea what to do." And you give them a handshake, you have that gleam of avarice in your eye, and you immediately buy them. And then you buy them for a fair enough price, and then you go and sell those herbs at a higher price in the league. And then you bring that spare coinage back and you donate half of your profits to the war chest. I'm making up the number of half your profits, but it feels fair. Like, if you go out and do lots of work, we need to ensure that players are having a good game and there's a
Rewarded.
reward for
Yeah.
it as well. Yeah, because if you go out and turn a throne into 1.5 thrones, get an extra 2.5 crowns or whatever from it, then sorry, it's four, 4 crowns. Gosh, I love Empire maths. You go and get 4 crowns. You pop 2 crowns in the war chest. That is, it's not going to shift the needle much. But if 20 of you do of it, or 40 or 60, then that cash rapidly mounts up, and suddenly you're buying wains, you're buying resources, you're buying those forest and mine measures that we talked about earlier, and then you're making an impact. But on top of that, you've got the other 2 crowns to keep for yourself. Go out and have a drink. Go and buy some cake. You just need
You
to
get
put
so
some
much for the
legwork in.
crown. You can, yeah. It is a real national effort. I'm just scrolling through the wind. What do you think of the ghost rave conjunction? 'Cause I
The
don't think I've
ghost
read this
rave.
properly, and it looks the ghost rave. It's titled "A Great Dance for Seren."
I think that's pretty based, and Navarr should sell tickets to it. um, yeah, the
Cool.
I don't know too much about that side of the VAR. I know like blood magic and dance in rituals is really important. This is like a relatively high accessibility skirmish. They literally say leave your weapons in anvils, so this seems to be like more of a cultural history thing.
Mm.
And the Eternal Flame of Niaran has been asked to investigate this. Number is TBC, but let's say it's 20 people or something. You're probably in store for a really wonderful little cultural skirmish, which
Yeah.
which
Do
probably
you
is going
think
to be
it's
really fun.
do you think it's in any way married to like the idea of improving the economy?
Nah, it
Yeah.
seems like an odd way to have this, but maybe some of these ghosts will be relevant to um to like the history of Navarre, because this is on the, like we mentioned this earlier, the City of Dreams is being built, and then on one of the building sites these ghosts are turning up basically. So we need to go and exercise the ghosts, but usually that's like a combaty thing with priests. This seems to be more like a join in the dance, and then once that
Mm.
dance is completed they get to those spirits are put to rest. Maybe it's to bind some players together, maybe it's to get some of the cultural and religious game to overlap a little bit. But broadly, I don't think this is actually too relevant to the wind, and this is actually just cool
Interesting.
and fun.
Yeah, it is very cool. Yeah. I think you're right there with the sort of getting a national identity and maybe reminding people of, the rich history of Navarre. Hopefully that, sort of musters them together a little bit.
Yeah, like the history of a sailor herself, um, killing an emperor in order to save the empire. That story of sacrifice, and it cost her life. Those kinds of stories are all over Navarre's history. Navarre are very good at talking about it to each other. They just need someone. They just need like in Mad Men,
I want to
they
kill
need.
the Empress.
Well,
No,
ooh.
we're not endorsing that.
delete, and rapidly cut that. But you need someone like Donald Draper or something, like some like like marketing whiz. It's like, right, this is all really good. How do we get that into other nations? How do we get other nations to care as much as we do about these things that are objectively worth caring about?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I can say the same thing again. TLDR, I think this is unprecedented from PD, and if I was to use my LARP spectacles, my specialist insight spectacles, this feels more like a OC push of like Navarre, get your act together, because it says that.
It feels like it feels like Navarre's last gasp for air. It is really like this is your final kind of hand-holding session. Anything after this is now your own fault. Good luck. And I think
Yeah,
we'll see the results. Who knows? Maybe we'll be back here next year spurring out the same stuff. I really hope not. But I think we're about to have a very interesting event.
yeah, and I think to end on a positive note, there's still time to fix this, and this lays out ways to do
Yeah.
so. Other nations do want to help. Other players want to help. You as Navari, and this is like a you plural, Jarl as Navari, need to go and grasp that hand a bit more firmly that's been reaching out to you. And maybe as a way to end the episode, if your leadership isn't supporting you in doing this, eat the
Eat them.
rich.
Yeah. While we eat our popcorn on the side, you guys eat your leaders.
Yeah, Navarre understands sacrifice, and it understands. It's similar to Farishka, but sometimes things must be done in order to win, and sometimes those things aren't palatable. And I this is explicitly. I'm going to make a very broad statement here, explicitly not targeting individual players, but over the last an amount of years, right, 5 plus, we've gotten into this scenario. Sorry, Navarre have gotten into this scenario. The leadership are to blame because they're the ones who have been leading the nation. And that isn't just hacks, that's people of import, influential people, um, anyone who's been guiding the nation or trying to. I can understand that's been quite difficult, but as an individual citizen, if you haven't been in those positions and you look upwards, those people above you have not represented you, they've not helped you, they've not delivered success for you. So perhaps eating the rich is the final consequence for the actions that we've seen.
I think it's very much that JFK, like, ask not what your Navarre can do for you, ask what you can do for your Navarre.
There we go. Great way to end the episode.
There
Yeah,
we go.
good quote. So yeah, um, crikey, what a place to be in with only how many days left until the event?
Don't want to think
6.
about it.
Well, 7 until
Ah,
yeah, 7 until play starts. In exactly 7 days, we're going to be talking about this in tents on Anvil.
yeah, I'm so excited.
Very exciting indeed. Right. Any closing or any other closing comments before we wrap up, Amber?
I don't think so. I think we tackled that quite hard. I'm just excited to see it in play now.
Yeah.
And yeah, be cool.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, dear listeners. Sorry that this wasn't Bastion or Eerie Lights or Empire 2. This was, in fact, somehow we prioritized pre E3 over post E2. But, if we were professionals, we'd be getting paid for this. So, you get what you're given and you will eat what you're given, including the rich.
And on that note,
Goodbye.
ciao.
Bye.